Salam, peace. I hope you're doing good. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you're watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, which covers all USA, California. Well, California is still USA, according to latest fake news, and all Canada and all Mexico. Also on Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, whole lot of social media, and of course on our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. That is muslimnetwork.tv. So how sun looks outside your window? When I look outside, well, the sun doesn't seem to have as much power. It's sunny for the last several days, but not quite sunny. What's happening there? And I was talking with a former colleague last night. She is in California. She used to be first producer with me when I was just doing the radio 20 years ago. And she says, you Americans are sending this smoke to my house, and I don't know where to find a filter because all filters seem to be have sold out. I'm healthy, but it's not a good feeling to breathe at this moment, but there's no choice except keep breathing. And then I call a colleague in Oregon, and she said fire is just 10 miles from her home. I hope since yesterday things have changed and she's safer. And she, after talking a few minutes, she started having difficulty in breathing. And she said she need to take a pause because of little bit of here and there that smoke is coming in, and she cannot run the air conditioning because that is not going to clean up. That's going to bring good air from outside and replace it from the bad air inside. What is going on here? And then our senior producer, she says fire is away to 130 miles away, 150 miles away. The 130 mile away says, well, I have a river close by. If my house is in danger, I invited all of them to come and just camp at my home and in my yard. Good people, very thankful. So what is going on in the West? And what is going on in the world? What is happening? How to make sense out of it? How do we protect ourselves? We have a scientist, we have a health expert, and we have a community strategic thinker, and they will all help us today to understand and be ready and prepared before CDC start issuing things. I think they are too busy with the pandemic. We need to talk about what else we could do. With us today is Professor Edward Lawrence. Welcome to Muslim Network TV, Professor.
Thank you. Good morning. Peace be with you.
And we have Jarrett Thomas Barrios. So welcome to Muslim Network TV, Jarrett.
Ahlan, Imam.
Hi. Salam, peace be with
Salam.
you. And Professor Anthony Wexler, welcome to Muslim Network TV.
Thank you. Salam alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. So that is very close with slight different pronunciation. When I was chair of Parliament of the World Religion, I appointed my co-chair, not co-chair, we don't have co-chair, but vice chair. He was Hyderabad of Chicago. He was the first one who taught me Salam Alaikum also. I said, wow, that's quite similar. Anthony Wexler is Distinguished Professor and Director, Air Quality Research Center at UC Davis. We're going to ask him if there are other campuses who focus a center on air quality. We have Edward Avol, who is a professor of Clinical Preventive Medicine and Division Chief of Environmental Health. So health expert there. And Jarrett Thomas Barrios, who is a Senior Vice President of Strategic Community and Programmatic Initiative at the California Community Foundation, a major institution. So first of all, how all three of you doing being in California? Are you thinking of moving to Chicago?
No chance.
The smoke, we are optimistic will eventually clear. We're dealing with some terrible problems now, but I think I'll stay in California. Thank you, though.
I know. That's why I said radio, Muslim network is all over United States and California, because you guys, I thought you are familiar with only other type of smoke. But not this type of smoke. But you are not only exporting that smoke, but this smoke all over the world as well. Tell us, how is it? Is the weather better now for you? How is the smoke quality, air quality?
In Northern California, which is where I am, it's a mix. It depends on if you are downwind of the current fires or whether you're fortunate enough to get some clean air from the ocean. So right now, I'm in Davis, California, and the air is really nice. But I know to the east of us, some of the air is pretty terrible because of the fires that are burning in that direction.
And here in Southern California, it's a similar story. We've gotten, depending on which way the wind is blowing, some of the smoke from Northern California, but we have several fires here in Southern California as well. And for many days in the last week or two, the smoke was blowing over much of Los Angeles region, and the air quality was actually very poor. Today and yesterday, the airflow has reversed, and it's a considerably cleaner across the area, although there still are fires burning.
So
We have
it depends, Jarrett, that it means in a day it could be 2-3 times change of wind and change of smoke. Then
absolutely. We also so I actually split my time between Los Angeles and a little town in Central California called Three Rivers, which is in Tulare County, very near one of the large fires. I'm about 9 miles from where the fire is, and it's coming closer. So we're very interested. Obviously, the air quality there is not good, but it does vary a lot based on the wind, and it has been shifting. The wind is now a bit of a westerly, and so it's actually blowing it. So it's good for us and bad for Nevada, I suppose, with that particular fire.
So what is the system of people being informed? I mean, you're 9 miles away from the burning fire. And is there a system? Do they have those alarms going up, or people have to receive text, or how does it happen?
So in Tulare County, as in many of the counties, a lot of them are coordinated through CAL FIRE and the California Office of Emergency Management. You have the option of signing up for a text notice. There is also other forms, a lot of public notices when an area becomes part of an evacuation zone. Typically in California, you'll begin with a voluntary, so the opportunity to evacuate, they'll notify you. And in more rural areas where we see the wildfires, you will have people with livestock, people who need a little bit more time to evacuate will start to evacuate when the voluntary order comes in. Then following that, if you're unlucky enough, you'll have a mandatory evacuation order, at which point everybody must leave. And while there are typically people who stay around, hopefully those orders are long enough in advance that people can evacuate before the fire trucks, the vehicles need to come in. And that's one of the reasons why they try to do it 1 or 2 days in advance of a fire. We were mandatory evacuated in Three Rivers Monday, and the fire is still 8 miles away. So it was well enough in advance that fire vehicles can do. They're creating their fire breaks right now. They're anticipating the fire, and to do that, they don't want to have residents around. So in an ideal situation, but as many of you, if you've been following the news, many of the fires, particularly in Northern California, have been moving at a much faster rate. So that ideal situation hasn't always been, we haven't been able to follow that, right, with enough advance notice before an evacuation happens. They will, in fast moving fires, they will go door to door. I used to work at the Red Cross for about a decade, and our partners in fire would go door to door and literally pull people out of homes in advance of the fires, as homes were already on fire, if it was in the middle of the night with a fast moving flame.
Oh my goodness. How many fires are burning right now? I mean, we're talking California, but fires are in Oregon and fires are in Washington. Um, Professor Anthony, are there networks which you keep up in different areas, or the air quality research is sort of in different islands?
So as far as the number of fires that are burning currently, I haven't kept track. A number of them have been put out or are under control, and so they will be out soon, fortunately. So it used to be that we were just surrounded by wildfires here, so no matter which way the wind blew, we would be getting smoke. But many of the fires again are out, and so we're under control, and so we have a chance for cleaner air right now. I haven't kept track. A lot of the fires, you talked a little bit earlier about how the fires started. Most of the fires started because of this lightning storm that came through. This is a kind of an unusual, or it used to be unusual, but maybe now it's more usual, what I call a dry lightning storm, where the clouds come through, lightning comes through, but without much rain. And those lightning starts lots of fires. It started, I don't know, I don't even remember the number, but it's thousands of fires were started all over the state by that lightning storm that happened a few weeks ago. And then what happens is you overwhelm the ability of firefighters to keep them under control. You have so many fires burning and so much tinder, so much flammable material in the end of the summer here, that it just overwhelms the ability of the firefighters to deal with it. So firefighters have come here from other states to help out, which has been hugely appreciated. And so it's a slow process of getting them under control.
It's so great for a human being trying to help each other. I mean, I remember many people went to New York. I mean, when pandemic was very high, they were overwhelmed. At one point, 10% of all physicians in New York trying to help were Muslims, although nobody recognized that. But one of them, when they died, then I started researching and realized there is a large number of people going from outside. So fire department people from other areas coming and helping is extremely important. I think probably there is some strategic plan, Jarrett, about that. But tell me, how far this smoke is going? I mean, is it does it's not limited there. It's heading to Nevada and Washington. I mean, the Vancouver, British Columbia, and Canada. Where all of this? How far can it go? Anybody has any idea?
Well, I think that's true. If you look at the maps, the smoke plume actually extends over much of the western United States, and once it gets up into the jet stream, has actually been carried over thousands of miles, even into Europe, across the country. And so the smoke itself, which of course is continuing to emanate from the active fires, continues to feed the smoke into the atmosphere, continues to spread over a wider and wider distance. And so even though one may be hundreds or thousands of miles away from the smoke, you still may be impacted by it. And that's what we're seeing certainly across the United States and actually in the last few days into Europe as well.
Professor Edward Avol, I mean, you are in medical sciences and researching the impact of it. So what is the immediate impact of those people who are directly there, say in California, Oregon, and Washington, very close proximity? And what's the impact for people who are in Midwest, who are seeing the sun almost not behaving like a sun, and far away in Europe? Is there a health impact? Most likely it varies from different places.
Well, it does vary in a lot of different places, and there are both short-term sort of immediate effects and longer-term effects that we're concerned about in terms of your health over the course of your lifetime. In the short term, aside from the immediate danger of the fire per se, there are short-term effects that have to do with chest irritation, eye irritation, coughing. For those who have pre-existing conditions such as asthma or respiratory disease, the possibility of triggering an event, having to take increased medication, those sorts of problems. In the longer term, the exposures may lead to the development or the exacerbation, making worse cardiovascular disease, respiratory disease, a whole number of diseases over the lifetime. We're talking about both children in terms of developing lungs and affecting their health and their growth. And we're also talking about the life course even into older adults and the rates of dementia, Alzheimer's, cardiovascular disease later in life. So these have effects across wide segments of the population.
That is, things which you describe covers a huge number of population there. So it's a sort of a short-term and a long-term medical crisis of its own. It seems like. So when we come back, I would like to dwell on it, that how our government is prepared and how communities are prepared about what Professor Avol is saying is the impact of this wildfires and its smoke. You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid. We're talking about wildfire, its impact on people and the environment, and we'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking about wildfire in the West and its impact on human beings as well as the environment. Professor Avol, you were mentioning not only impact on those people who already have certain types of disease, but also long-term impact on child growth. Could you just elaborate a little more on that, about the long-term impact?
Sure. Well, we know that when children are developing, when we are developing and the organs in your body are reaching maturation, they can be very sensitive to outside stimuli, to what you breathe, what you eat, etc. And so the problem potentially for children who are in the face of the smoke areas for extended periods of time is that, much like growing a tree in your backyard, a plant, you can actually change the shape, change the trajectory of that growth by the effects while it is growing. And so for a child who is constantly exposed to, for example, smoke or air pollution, that may actually change the shape and ultimately the maximum growth that they can achieve. And this will have lifelong impact on their health.
Is this as an area where a lot of medical research has already been done?
Yes, here at USC, we've actually been studying the effects of air pollution, of outdoor air pollution on children, thousands of children across California for the last 25 years or so, and following those children as they get older. Now, of course, they're not children. They are now young adults in their 20s and 30s. And so we've seen that those that start out with sort of a poor start sort of have a blunted growth trajectory, we might say, and that year after year of the impacts of living in a polluted environment affects their health, and they actually are measurably smaller in terms of lung function, performance, and symptoms and so forth than their peers who grew up in cleaner places. And so the similar sort of scenario could play out for someone who's exposed to smoke as well, because smoke, many of the pollutants in smoke, both the particles and the gases, are conjure up the same sorts of images and the thoughts and understanding that we have with regard to what we might call more conventional air pollution.
Wow, that's serious impact on the next generation. And I hope younger people who I have marched with for the on the issue of climate change are concerned about their future children. I mean, this seems to have a very long-term thing. Question, go ahead, please.
Imam, I wanted to specifically mention, if I could build on Professor Avol's point.
Please.
We see in California a disparate impact, and Professor Avol, I don't know if you are an expert on this, but many folks, based on their profession, don't have the option of staying at home. It's sort of like with COVID, where we see not everybody can work from home during COVID. We have a large population of migrant farm workers who work in the Central Valley and in wine country. And so they are, just like with COVID, they are forced to work outdoors with this smoke. And in many cases, we see their employers not providing them with proper masks. Not that masks are going to do everything, but so there is an inordinate impact, particularly in some of our more vulnerable populations, vulnerable in this sense to these impacts. And these are some of the people who have this, who don't have a voice in our government a lot of times, and therefore we are, a lot of us are very worried about, especially with those populations, these impacts.
Yeah, I think that's an important point to make. So I thank Jarrett for bringing that up. We know from a lot of research that sort of pollution is not an equal opportunity employer, that their impacts are disproportionate among people of color. And those that are in lower socioeconomic means, that live by already pre-existing polluting sources, they and don't have access to regular health care, et cetera. Those are the people that are more reactive. And as Jarrett mentioned, people that are on the front lines that are working regardless, out in the fields, outdoor workers, et cetera, they are more exposed than others. And or at home, those other populations may not be able to afford air conditioning and other ways of protecting themselves and their loved ones. And so they are at not only increased risk, but have more negative effects in terms of the health outcomes.
Yeah, it is same which the pandemic did. The poor and the, in Chicagoland, Black and Latinos were 75% higher in the death rate. They are not only essential workers, but least equipped to protect themselves and least opportunities. Tell us, Professor Wexler, how is government ready for this ongoing phenomena? Because this is not happening just once. It seems like something ongoing. Is government ready to handle these things? And then I want to hear from Jarrett about the communities being ready and the healthcare professionals and funding available to handle these type of things. So please go ahead, Professor Wexler. Do you think government is ready? I mean, the reason question is very important for me because 3 years ago, a person, highly qualified person serving in a high position in EPA, federal employee, applied for a very small job, and he worked for me for a few months. I said, why you're doing that? He said, well, because I have nothing to do in my life. I'm prohibited. I say, you are prohibited verbally? He said, no, in writing, that I cannot make a presentation. And the whole list of his job description, he was told he cannot do. So he worked for me until he was given some work. I went back. So is the government ready to, and government is forcing these things, allocating proper resources to deal with this ongoing phenomena?
Yeah. So I think we have to first separate into the different kinds of government, right? There's federal government, state government, and county, local governments, city governments. And some of them are more prepared and some of them are less prepared. Unfortunately, some parts of our government are in denial about climate change. And what we're seeing in wildfires is fundamentally a climate change issue. It's one of the many manifestations, including, so the wildfires, but also all the hurricanes that we're seeing in the Atlantic and the Pacific are also part of what we're seeing in climate change, and we'll be seeing more. The problem with climate change, it's become a politicized issue, and so some people are convinced that this is not an issue, and we're going to be facing this regardless of what people try to deny or try to ignore. Climate change is happening, and some governments are trying to get a handle on what to do to prepare for new weather norms, new wildfires, extreme heat, flooding, drought. We're going to be seeing all kinds of new patterns that we are not used to, and government needs to prepare. And so there are some governments that are preparing or trying to prepare, and some that are ignoring. And some that are preparing but not talking about it because they're afraid of what people will say, because the political climate is not very, it's not great for discourse, for rational discourse right now.
Isn't this sad? I mean, you had an extraordinary important point, Professor, that it has become a bipartisan issue. Actually, I met Al Gore, and one-on-one, I requested him to maybe approach President Bush, because he has built a house which is environmentally and climate-wise more up a scale, and he's doing nothing but making paintings and chopping wood. So I told him, why not you request an appointment and bring him on that issue? You know, former presidents do take up causes. So if Al Gore joins with President Bush that this is not a partisan issue, I think it may have politically resolved it. I don't know. What do you think? Do you think it's going to help something like that? We need to liberate it from the partisan box. Everybody is living here. Everyone is going to suffer. Poor nation probably going to suffer more. Our minorities and poorer people in our society are already suffering more. So liberating it, somebody should put money on liberating this thing from the being a partisan political issue, because that is hurting. Won't you think this will be a good strategic thing? What's your idea, Jarrett? I'm a strategic thinker. If you have job opening, I may consider applying.
That you have to move to Los Angeles, though, Imam.
Oh, too many types of smokes there.
Well, we have much better winters than you. We do, I swear.
Yeah, my garden is already dead. Yesterday I was just working on composting instead of taking care of anything from out of my garden. So, that I'm jealous of. But
so I want to say a few things. It is a shame that I don't. It feels as if in my years doing disaster response and recovery work, my time at the Red Cross, so often you saw people coming together after a major disaster, hurricanes, wildfires, what have you. And it's important to recognize that not just I'm not an expert on climate science, and we've got two experts with us, but in the area of response and recovery, which is also, there is a role for government, right? It does feel as if that has also become a bit partisan. The way FEMA assistance works, after there is, and I'll use the context of California. If you're a homeowner, particularly if you're a homeowner who's, and you have all your papers in order and you've got your birth certificate and you've got all the stuff you need, it's a fairly straightforward process to move through FEMA assistance. If you are, let's go back to our migrant farm workers. You're impacted by a wildfire in, say, Napa Valley or Sonoma County, Napa or Sonoma. You're impacted because you've now lost your job as a result of that fire. FEMA assistance doesn't provide help for people who lose their jobs. It only provides if you own a home. If you rent a home, no. If you have a job that you've been affected by. So the people who are the more vulnerable in our society, the way our disaster relief works, it helps you if you own a business or if you own a home. People who are less fortunate in our society, who earn less, are likely to be renters and are more likely to be impacted by losing jobs. And so that shouldn't be a partisan issue, but the way it has manifested, there doesn't seem to be a lot of interest in today's Washington in helping ensure that people are being affected. We saw this not here in California, but with Hurricane Harvey, which has been one of the most expensive disasters in our country in this current partisan environment. We saw that dramatically play out. People actually got more money than they needed who owned homes in some of the suburban communities. And the people who were most impacted in terms of damage to their livelihoods received the least amount of assistance. So I would agree with you that it has become something that while both parties should play an interest in, unfortunately, that hasn't turned out to be the case in the last few years.
Janet, my question is, since you're in the strategic considered development areas of the community trust there, I mean, California community trust, I thought community trusts are just city by city, but for the whole state, which is like a country in itself, it must be extraordinary. Are there some deliberations there how to prepare communities, not just the government, but the community aspect of it? Are communities prepared to handle those people who are, for example, most vulnerable, which you are talking about? Are they, this has been a great American tradition. I mean, when Katrina happens, Uncle Sam were nowhere to be found. I mean, it was a mosque there, which happened to be in high elevation, which became the center of all the Baptist and other Jewish synagogue and all that were congregating and planning to help each other out. So communities in America are one of the major network of support. So what are the deliberations in your organizations in terms of developing a collective organizing and rearranging resources in consideration of long-term thinking?
So first of all, the California Community Foundation is primarily focused on greater Los Angeles. We're not a statewide, but with wildfires, we have for about 30 years, we have a wildfire fund, and we accept donations, and we raise money to distribute across California in the wake of a wildfire to support relief and recovery efforts. And it's this idea of recovery, Imam, this idea of perhaps equitable recovery that we really like to focus on. How we can help make sure that, this is going to sound like a campaign plug for one of the candidates, but this helps us ensure that we build back better, right?
You are partisan, and you seems to be proud of it.
Hey, the line works. It's a great line. In the context of our wildfires, that literally where you have homes being destroyed, in many of these thousands of homes in some cases, that we are going to try to build back, to recover in a way that makes us more resilient. Unfortunately, what we see in many cases is not just individuals, but governments, as they've recovered, they have very short memories, right? People want to get back to normal with their lives. And whether it's after an earthquake or a wildfire here in California, people have short memories. And so one of the things we hope to support through our philanthropy, are investments in creating a fabric of nonprofits that are in many ways the safety net for our communities, our most vulnerable populations, that they are going to be able to work with the public, that even if the public is short-sighted or forgetful, that we work to provide skills and training and investments that will support a more resilient community fabric, in particular our more vulnerable populations, immigrant populations, lower income communities, so that they can be better prepared next time.
Professor Avol, I mean, are you seeing the challenges of short-term and long-term health, which you describe, which could result because of the smoke, inhalations, and those are serious stuff. Are you seeing some government funding or some community foundations funding flowing towards research and some preventive measures and what need to be done to keep people healthier and not have a big impact on the growth of children?
Well, I think, there is some research being done on trying to understand sort of what's happening. And then there needs to be education. So there needs to be funds set aside to educate the public so that we better understand what to do with the information we have. Because again, we have some understanding that can affect the lives of all of both our children, our families, etc., across the age range. So we're talking about taking care of our respected elders as well as taking care of our children. So it really looks at everybody across the age range. So it's not, yes, there is funding at the National Institute of Health, for example, to look at fundamentally what is going on at the biological level, how do we predict these? How do we understand this? How do we respond to this? But then translating that into educational programs that then help the public to make better choices. To follow up on a comment that Jarrett made, I think, we can debate about climate change. As Tony pointed out, many people are in denial about whether or not it's there. We can debate that, but I would suggest to you, based on all the phenomena around her, the debate is over. I mean, this is happening around us, and what we really need to do is no longer, I think, argue about whether it is or it isn't, but think about how we adapt to it, because we're past trying to accept whether it's real or not. I think we need to think in terms of society about how do we adapt to it? What do we do? As Jarrett pointed out, everybody wants to get back to normal after an event like this, be it a wildfire or a hurricane, et cetera. But the problem is they go back and they rebuild their home right where it was, or they go back and try to recreate their life exactly as it was. The difficulty, of course, is our urban policies have been such that we are now maybe encroaching upon some of the natural environment, and maybe we shouldn't be building so close and so far into forest land and so forth. We need to think more about how we build, where we build, and then what materials we use to build, so we can be more thoughtful about being able to withstand Category 4 hurricanes or terrible wildfires, et cetera, by reducing the risk around our homes, around our communities. And I think that's going to be increasingly a very important way of how we utilize that, which does play into improved health for the entire community.
So you mentioned there is a research funding at least is available, and then you went on the educational aspect of it. I mean, the largest health providers in America are community health centers, which came through the civil rights movement, which continuously benefit, and is still the largest network of health providers. At that level of grassroots health centers, do you think information about what are the impacts of this thing, because they do not only provide health, but they do a lot of education around serious issues. Do you think this thing is reaching at that level, or it is just a high academic level of concern?
Well, I think it's probably somewhere in between. It's not down to the level. I think not enough people, the word is not out and fully distributed among the population in order to practically make a day-to-day difference. I think there are things we can do, better ways of sharing this information, getting out to more people, providing them with methodologies, with approaches, with ideas, and helping them to sort of cope with all these changes that are coming into their lives. For many of us, the thought was that climate change was not something that was going to happen in my lifetime. We always talk about this as being, decades away, generations away. The sea level is going to rise, but not while I'm here. But, all these things are happening now, where you're seeing this now, and we need to respond to it now.
So communities, I'd like to follow along what Ed was just saying. So you folks probably remember a couple of years ago when the town of Paradise was basically burned to the ground in terrible wildfire here. And the city council was caught between rebuilding using conventional building technology, which involves wooden buildings. That's what we mostly build buildings out of here in the United States. And people were saying, wait a second, maybe we should be building out of metal or out of brick or out of other materials that are not so susceptible to wildfire, but people want to rebuild their homes to move back in. And so the city council was caught between these sort of conflicting imperatives. Do you build quickly with materials and methods that you know how to use and get people back into their homes, or do you rethink but then delay all that? It's a tough decision to make, and I think we'll be facing more of these tough decisions.
If I could also add to that, thank you, Dr. Wexler is spot on with this. There is the idea of hardening the home, right? Creating it so that it's more resistant to fires. There are they're not always more expensive ideas, right? Like, for example, instead of having a shingle roof, the best thing you can do to reduce wildfire risk for a home that's in a wildfire risk area is to put a tin roof on, right? And it's a very cost-effective solution. One of the big causes for these fires, we saw with the Woolsey fire in LA, about 500 homes burned in the very Tony community of Malibu. There was no wildfire spreading in Malibu. Most of those homes burned because of ash from the areas that were burning had landed on the roofs, right? So the idea of hardening your home, of putting a tin roof on, is a very cost-effective way. So not all of these things require, some sort of 21st century space age style home, right? It's different materials in a perhaps otherwise traditional type home that you're rebuilding, and changing the code. Unfortunately, some people don't have the wherewithal because people have these assumptions about what it is. The other one, if I could build on Dr. Wexler's point, are some of the zoning rules that are put in place in the urban wild interface, where you have, there's a lot of pressure in California, and this exists in other states, but especially in California because of the high cost of housing. We know that one of the ways to relieve the high cost of housing is to build more housing, but that if you're building that housing by building up into the mountains where all these forests are, right, you're actually increasing the risk of a wildfire burning down more homes, because we've built into the areas of higher risk. And the laws haven't caught up with that either, unfortunately, in terms of discouraging that sort of building.
So how we build houses, how we live with the environment. I mean, there's a whole lot of education which seems to be needed. I remember I was engaged in somewhat helping in the Haiti when the earthquake took place. And I researched a lot, and I found a person in Texas who has developed this material, a brick sort of from plastic type of material, which were fire retardant, but also not heavy to kill people when they collapse. And it was very cheap. I mean, it was tested by some science foundation, and on 9 Richter scale, it survived. I mean, their machine broke down, but it was still standing there. But I tried to educate. I did a show on radio and all that, but it seems education, when disaster is over, no one wants to talk about that. So before we move forward in a short break towards conclusion, Professor Wexler, what exactly then that Paradise decided? The city council allowed people to do whatever they want?
Yeah, they basically rebuilt with wood, but it comes back to what you were asking earlier about, and I think this is an ideal case here where governments can do things like Jarrett was talking about, changing the building codes, changing how we think about building so that they're more resilient. And so we won't have so many of these problems in the future. The tin roof example, building out of other materials. This is not rocket science. This is something we already know how to do. But education is important for government, right? For people who are on city councils and county councils to move the needle forward here, to improve how we think about things and prepare, just as you were asking earlier.
You're watching Muslim Network TV. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and we're talking about wildfires in the West Coast, which some people call left coast, and its impact on people and the environment. We'll be right back after these messages. Welcome back to Muslim Network TV. You're watching us on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, Apple TV, whole lot of social media, and our own website, muslimnetwork.tv. And we're talking extraordinary panel of scholars and researchers and strategic thinkers about how to deal and what we can do, wildfire, health-related issues, air quality issues, and responsibility towards those who are the most vulnerable. In conclusion, we just have 5 minutes. I like to focus. I mean, I have to skip through a lot of good questions, which I thought now finally I'm realizing my questions are not as dumb as I normally am. But tell me what communities can do. I mean, how we should prepare. I mean, when I ask my staff, move over here, just like you all, oh, no, 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 we are good where we are. I mean, I'm offering them space, free space until this thing is over. They're happy. Of course, everyone likes where they are. So how people should prepare? I ask her to get air filter. I say, oh, none is available. They're all sold out. So what is it people can do, Professor Avol, for their personal health? I mean, it is, after all, it's for each person, it's a personal issue, right? And an issue for their family. What is it people can do? Because they have no choice but to breathe, right?
Absolutely. Well, I think there are a number of things we can do. Either, I guess, in an ironic way, because of the pandemic, many of us are sensitized to regularly using masks whenever we go out, and many of us have masks or face covering to protect ourselves. So people have been desensitized to the notion of wearing some kind of personal protective device. That can be of help if the mask fits your face well across the nose and cheeks and is snug against your face so that the air does not leak in through the sides. But masks differ in terms of the quality of how well they effectively take out the smoke or the particles. And so just a cloth mask or a bandana is not going to be especially effective, but the dust nuisance masks, the N95 masks, et cetera, are specifically constructed actually to stop these small particles from getting in. So you can wear a mask would help to some extent. Reducing your ventilation, how much exercise you're getting during smoky or dirty events, dirty air events, will help, because then you think of yourself as a vacuum cleaner. If you turn off the vacuum cleaner, you process less air. And so by reducing the amount of exercise you're getting, you will reduce the amount of pollutants you're taking into your body. In your home, if you have an air conditioning system, first of all, keep the windows and doors closed. But secondly, if you have an air conditioning system, set it on recirculate and operate it to help clean out some of the particles in the home. If you do not have an air conditioning system, keep the windows and doors closed. If you have cracks or leaks, that air leak that comes under the front door or over the windowsill, take a damp towel and stick it there to try and stop the air from coming in. So there are a number of things we can do in the home that will protect your family and keep you safer. Obviously, we don't want to generate indoor air has its own sources of pollutants as well. So if you're indoors, we don't want you, lighting fires, lighting candles, burning incense during this time, because that generates indoor pollution, which will be kept inside and build up the concentrations inside. But there are many things you can do. If you're in your car, keep your windows rolled up, set your air system on recirculate, and let the passenger compartment filter sort of clean up the air in your car. That will be dramatically cleaner than keeping the window open as you drive down the street. And so all these things can help take care of yourself during this time.
Are there some advice, Jarrett, you have for communities to prepare? Because these things it seems like I'm going to ask for Professor Wexler a little later. Probably these things going to continue to happen. So he will connect the dots for us. But tell us, Jarrett, what your advice is for community organizations and groups around this in the area of education.
So in the area of education, I would say there's sort of two tiers, right? There's what we do to educate individuals about where to go for information. One of the most important things is to know where to go, because wildfires can be fast changing. So like we said earlier, this idea of signing up for an alert, for a text alert, knowing where to do that, knowing that that's even available is very important. But also people knowing what a go bag is, right? Like in the case of a wildfire, to pack your car up so that, because you might get woken up in the middle of the night by a firefighter pulling you out to leave. So having everything, you're not going to have time to pack your home if you have to evacuate. So get ready now if you're in the zone of any potential wildfire risk. So that sort of education needs to happen at the local level, and it needs to happen in the languages of the people that live in the community. So it needs to be culturally competent in how we deliver it, and that's not something we always do well in California. I think some of us try, but we can do a better job. The other education that needs to happen is with our politicians and with sort of our civic leaders. And it gets to this issue of the policies that we have that we were talking about earlier. You know, we don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish, focusing all of our resources on preparing people and accepting that these wildfires are inevitable. We can do stuff long term to change policies that will reduce risk in the long term. That education needs to happen, and that has to happen with our politicians.
Professor Wexler, you have the last comment on this, and it is important for us to, our people who are watching our show, to recognize the fact that you have spent your time researching that. Why people should take, a final thought, why people should take the climate change seriously and consider all these cyclones on the East Coast and the wildfire on the West Coast as a part of a phenomena which probably is not going to go away. So what are your thoughts in conclusion on this?
Yeah, that's a very important question. Climate change will affect just about everything eventually. So we have these wildfires, and now that we are seeing terrible, we see the hurricane season this year is awful, and floods and droughts all over the planet. We're seeing weather. We're seeing record weather all the time, and you see it in the newspaper. Oh, there's a heat wave. Oh, there's a flood or whatever. The incidence, the frequency of these extreme weather events is going to increase, and which was predicted by climate scientists a long time ago. And this is going to affect everybody. It's going to affect you not just as far as the direct effects of, say, a hurricane flooding your home or a wildfire burning down your home, but it's going to affect you in your wallet too, because the prices of food will go up if there are areas that have had a drought or a flood that wipe out some crops, for instance. So this is going to affect us in every way, and something that Dr. Avol talked about earlier, which is something we call climate adaptation, is very important. That is, we need to be thinking about, we need to do two things at the same time. We need to do what's called climate mitigation, which is reducing the greenhouse gases that we are emitting into the atmosphere, at the same time that we're doing climate adaptation, which is how do we change, the building codes that Jarrett brought up, and political thinking about how do we prepare for these disasters. So at every level, we need to be working on this and preparing and trying to minimize the damage.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you so much, Professor Anthony Wexler and Jarrett Thomas Barrios and Professor Edward Avol. I'm truly appreciative of you sparing good amount of your time helping me and our listeners learn from how to prepare for it. Thank you so much. May God bless you and continue the good work which you're doing, concern for humanity, short term and the long term. And thank you, Sherdil Khan and Dr. Wahid for producing today's show. This is Imam Malik Mujahid, and you have been watching Muslim Network TV on Galaxy 19 satellite, Amazon Fire TV, Roku, as well as Apple TV. We are 24/7 also on Muslim Network TV on our website. Peace. Salam.